Hello and welcome to Books from Your Therapist, a podcast where we talk to therapists and mental health practitioners about their mental health related book recommendations. By mixing book talk with mental health, we hope to open up the conversation around books your therapist may have suggested and make them more accessible.
This podcast is not a substitute for mental health care. It's for educational and entertainment purposes only. I'm Amanda Throckmorton, a marriage and family therapist in California.
And I'm Tara Kremen, and I work in the book industry in Toronto, in Canada. In this episode, it's just Amanda and I, and we are talking about loneliness versus being alone and the dance of balancing solitude versus connection. And the books that we picked to chat about are The Correspondent by Virginia Evans and Alone on Different Ways of Living by Daniel Schreiber.
Filled with the knowledge that only comes from a life fully lived, The Correspondent is a novel about the power of finding solace in literature and connection with people we might never meet in person. It is about the hubris of youth and wisdom of old age and the mistakes and acts of kindness that occur during a lifetime.
At no time before have so many people lived alone, and never has loneliness been so widely or keenly felt. Drawing on personal experience as well as philosophy and sociology, Daniel Schreiber explores the tension between the desire for solitude and freedom and the desire for companionship, intimacy, and love.
It was a really great conversation. Tara and I got to explore themes of alone versus loneliness. We looked at some really big themes of family, grief, love, and friendships. So join us.
All right, so we're going to start with you, Amanda. Why did you pick this book?
So I picked this book because, I think we were thinking about doing an episode, the two of us, and this had been a book that had been sort of orbiting around. I know you had heard of it, and I think I had gotten a lot of praise online. So I was kind of interested to choose a book that seemed currently very popular. Yeah, I think it was fun to kind of start from there and build an episode.
I was kind of laughing at we've done some heavy subjects lately, and we were like, let's do a light episode and picked these books, and this isn't what happened. These are more heavier subjects than I think we had anticipated, but enjoyable nonetheless.
Absolutely. Yeah, I felt like there was quite a bit of existentialness to to these two books. But, I'm really glad we picked it. And for those that don't know about The Correspondent, it's a book that is highlighting Sybil Van Antwerp's life, who's a 70-year-old woman. And the book is unique in that it's I always say this wrong, epistolary. Is that right?
Yeah, I also mispronounce it all the time.
Epistolary, yes, novel, which essentially the whole novel takes place with letters, emails, and journal entries to and from Sybil. So it kind of starts out as a cozy novel where you're like, okay, it's this lady in this sunset stage of her life, and she's writing these letters and emails to people. And then it kind of moves into a lot more complex territory. And so, she's writing these emails and correspondence, and that's how the entire story is laid out. And so you kind of start with okay, I'm learning about this lady. Where is this going? And then it really delves into some deeper topics grief and trauma and this idea of loneliness, family dynamics. It is pretty amazing how all these things sort of unfold just through letters, journals, and emails.
And she's a lady that's choosing to live on her own as well. So the letter writing is interesting as a way of you're kind of getting her. You can just imagine her every day sitting down to sit and write her letters.
Mm-hmm.
Did you like the format? Because did you like the format of the epistolary novel? And two, did you read or listen? I can't remember.
So I listened to
Okay,
this.
I read it. Yeah.
Okay. Which I think is interesting because it did really help me sort of picture who this character is. And Sybil is such a complex person, like all of us, right? she's this very fierce, sassy, cantankerous sort of lady that is, you don't always agree with the way she sees things. And you're sitting in this like complexity with her, which I really anticipated. I think it made it feel more real. I don't know, to have such a complex character that also feels very relatable.
I kind of enjoyed how there was a little bit of a puzzle where you had to kind of figure out who she was writing to. You're like,
Hmm.
it'll take a couple of letters. You're like, oh, that's her brother, and that's her best friend that's also somehow married into her family, and that's a message from her daughter that's a little bit tense. But the way that it was written, I thought was great because it lets the reader do a lot of the work of like figuring it out. I'm so curious if there was like letters that were edited out or like what the framework looked like for the writer putting it together. I think that would be interesting.
Yeah, I thought it was so well done. And to your point, at first I was a little bit like, I don't know where this is going. I'm a little bit confused. I had a moment of like, I don't know if this is for me. I really feel like it came together towards the end, and well, not even towards the end, more in the middle when everything started to really click and you could tell that there were some themes that they were diving into. But yeah, I enjoyed living in Sybil's world for a little bit.
I didn't know it could be so gripping to read somebody else's letters. You're like a little peek inside. But I don't know a lot about Virginia Evans, but in her acknowledgements at the end, I think she studied in Dublin and referenced Claire Keegan, who is like one of my favorite Irish authors right now. She wrote that book that got adapted into a film, and they're casting the second one that is being adapted now. But actually, a bunch of them. I think she's written on Colleen Kewen and Small Things Like These, which was the Cillian Murphy movie. She writes short stories that are really like each word is so placed with such intention that so much happens, even though you're reading like this less than 100 pages book. It was interesting to have read
Mm,
this entire book and then at the end saw that. And I was like, oh, I wonder if there was like, yeah, just as I was thinking about the editing process of like what you've left in and what you've deliberately left out of the letters as well. I thought it was interesting. I wanted to get into the mind of the writer a little bit to understand the process.
totally. And for a debut novel, I was like, wow, this is such a unique and cool perspective. Like I said, I don't think I actually have read any novels like this in the past. So it was a great journey. Did it make you want to start or continue writing letters?
Yeah, I mean, I like sending stuff in
Mm-hmm.
the post or sending stuff in the mail. I'm a big Christmas card sender.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy sending like birthday cards when I remember. So I do like the idea of sending letters or even like longer emails. It did sort of make me a little bit nostalgic for that when you would sit down and tell somebody, hey, this is what's been going on for the past month or so, which with us being so online now, it's like inferred that you know a lot of that information. So I find messages are a little bit harder, especially, when you're like with friends all over the world. It's hard to keep in touch with people and it can just be like, hey, what's new? Not a lot. That's it. So it made me miss like the long form, maybe not necessarily just like letter writing, though I think that's kind of special too. Just like a deeper, actually, insight into your life at that point. I think that's, yeah, made me a bit nostalgic for that. Maybe I'll start.
I will say, I think you are great about sending physical mail. And I totally hear you on kind of craving that longer format because we are just so instantly connected. We live in different countries, and I mean, we use a lot of Marco Polo. I know we might be the only ones that use
We're the
that.
only people left on this app, but I like it.
But I like it too. But it is like we have that instant sort of correspondence. And I think one aspect of the letter writing is this idea of we all have the opportunity to be memorialized with our loved ones. And that's something that, really stood out to me was like, yeah, missing the stage where we used to write more letters. And I had a friend who read this book last year and wrote me like a beautiful postcard after. And it just really made me appreciate, the control we actually do have over our own correspondence. Like I know I'm guilty of the instant gratification of a text message. And recently I know that this is not new, but I've been very into voice notes. I'm like, this is great. I don't have to text. I can speak to this. Yeah, it did make me sort of open and crave a different way of corresponding, especially with folks that maybe don't live so close to me.
Yeah, I just received a postcard actually that my neighbor
Mm,
was like, "Did you know that there's one jammed in your mail?" And I was like, "No, I don't check my mailbox." Like, no, I had no idea there was a postcard there. My buddy sent one from Tasmania in Australia. What
mm,
I liked about it is because I think anytime I've sent a postcard, which I do sometimes from the States, I feel like I don't ever know what to write, or even in a Christmas card, you're kind of sitting
yeah.
down and you're like, okay, I'm doing my 30 and like, hey, happy holidays, have a wonderful time. Hope Santa is generous. And it's sort of that. But this postcard was really nice. It's like my friend had just described a hike that he had been on and then just ended with like, and then I kept going and I saw a platypus. It's like, great. That's like,
Yeah.
what a nice moment to capture that he's probably forgotten about. But it was sort of nice, but it made me want to put more thought into at least the cards that I'm writing and like giving a little bit of a snippet of your life as well. And what I liked about this book was that, sometimes I can be a bit guilty of like you not that you want to send things to receive them, but like sometimes you want to like balance the effort.
Hmm.
Sybil didn't really care about that. She sent stuff just to send it out into the world. So I kind of liked that piece as well.
Yeah, like it was truly her form of communication and
Hmm.
connection, and she stayed true to that all the way through.
Yep. I know we like to talk about friendship, you and I, on the podcast and outside of it as well. But just curious about what you thought about Sybil living her solo life and then the friendships that are mentioned in the book, because there's a couple of long-standing ones and then there's a couple of new ones.
I appreciated watching her character develop and starting to understand the circumstances in which have like led her to a solo life. So I feel like for me, it was part life circumstance, early traumas, grief, and a self-preservation that had created this solo existence for her, and also choices she's made and the way she's, yeah, has decided to live her life. And so I think it was cool to watch her effort with long-standing friendships, newer connections that she also kept up with via correspondence. And, it made me want to be more open to everyday run-ins with people and just there was like a remembrance that like we can make connections and we can form bonds, short term or seasonal bonds with people out in the world. And I think it was safer for her to make those relationships than actually maybe connecting with some of her family, given sort of the history and what had taken place. So it was really interesting to see that she seemed like a fierce friend and also maybe a very difficult one in some ways, but I also think that just made her feel more real to me.
Hmm. Yeah, as a character, she's challenging because you warm to her, but then she makes some choices where you're not fully backing. So it's interesting as the reader because you're kind of going along with it and you're like, do I like her? I don't know. But I'm going to stay with it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think that's what was cool when I thought about her friendships. She had all these different sides, and to some people she was one thing, and to others she was another. And I do think she was herself all the way through and formed these connections that we got to see through letter, which I thought was really cool.
I like that. I think sometimes a lot of people think as you get older, like it is harder to make friends for sure. But what
Hmm.
I liked about this book is that it showed that it's not impossible at all. Like you just have to make a little bit of effort. And she's making friends with a teenager and like a much older person and all sorts of people. And yeah, I always like the idea of just being open to like, yeah, new friends can come into your life at any stage.
It made me so open right after I finished this book that I had this day where I had gotten a ticket to go to the San Francisco Giants opening day. And I took the ferry by myself. And instead of sitting on my phone or like listening to music or something, I someone sat next to me and we talked the whole time, and then on the way back it was someone else that I connected with, and it was so nice to remember that I have access to that all the time. I feel like as I've gotten older, I get more into my routines. I have less encounters with strangers that feel impactful. And so it felt really nice to remember that I have that inside of me. And it was like right after I finished the book and I was like, look at me. Like, like, am I gonna write these people letters? Probably not. But like that
I
was a
don't even
nice
know their
experience.
names.
I know. I do know their names, but that's all, you know.
Yeah.
But I liked that too, right? I wasn't like, oh, I have to find this person on social media or whatever it was. It was like, oh yeah, like I can take the connecting part of this and not have to feel like this is someone that I have to carry through for the rest of my life too.
Yeah. I did want to like help Sybil at some point though with because she's very old school with like a pen and paper. But like because part of it is that she's kind of lose not to give any I don't think it's like a spoiler, but like she's kind of losing her eyesight or it's getting harder for
Hmm.
her as she's getting older. Her vision is becoming a bit more impaired. And part of me wanted to be like, there's so many accessibility tools that could help you and you could continue writing letters in a different way or but I guess she's like the stubborn character that wouldn't have helped with that. So it was an interesting contrast between, I mean, some of the things that she's messaging are emails, but her being so, I guess there is something about the pen and the paper and the writing, but technology can be really positive for older people. So I was like, had a little back and forth with that as well.
Definitely, she was rigid in a lot of ways, which I think kind of added to her character. But yeah, you're as a reader, you're like, this doesn't have to go away. One thing I really liked in, you know, this kind of touches on friendship too, is that whether that was choice or circumstance, Sybil really de-emphasized romantic love for most of her life. And we really get to see how she's pouring into these other relationships. And that's sort of challenging. This idea that romantic love is like the most meaningful connection. What did you think about this in terms of alternate ways of living one's life?
I loved it. I loved seeing a kind of stronger, I mean, I guess stubborn, independent woman living alone and choosing to do so. I think at part of the book there's like potential suitors and she's sort of like, just like really wanting to focus on her life as she has it there. I mean, we learn the reasons behind this that kind
Yeah.
of becomes more apparent that perhaps she's isolating herself more than she is being this forthright,
Hmm.
independent lady. But I just really liked it though too that her life was meaningful in how she was living it with her friends and her friendships and relationships, and she wasn't striving for, oh, I need a partner to look after me because I'm getting older and struggling. And she was sort of reluctantly did, request help at certain points, but I liked the framing of her as just focusing especially on her friendships and a little bit of her friendship with her previous husband. I guess maybe she could put potentially more attention into her children. But again, there's yeah, as you slowly understand a little bit more about the backstory, you kind of see why. But yeah, it made me chuckle that she had like two suitors at some point when she's this lady in her 70s and like she's sort of laughing about like getting married. Ugh, like why would I do that? And like, but I just thought it was great. I always think it's wonderful. It's like you could find me. It's the same with friendship. You can meet somebody and your life can change at any stage of life, you know? I think there can be a little bit of we can become down on ourselves if we're single for a long time or living alone, or society sort of makes it seem like some sort of failure. Actually, no, it's a choice. It's a choice that people are making to prioritize themselves. So I liked that the protagonist had, for the most part, was choosing that lifestyle.
I agree with all of that. I feel like there's the isolation due to circumstance and life experience. And yeah, she kind of challenged maybe this stereotype that we have of like the older mother being overly involved. I mean, I agree she could have been a lot more involved, but that does seem to be addressed in the book. But yeah, I agree. I think she had a real strength to her that I think is great to highlight, and also highlight just the different seasons of life and maybe a romantic relationship does feel super important to you in your 20s. And then for a lot of us, when we're lucky, our lives are long and we live a lot of different seasons. And so it was kind of fun to see a season of life where it's like a husband, like, absolutely not. I'm so set in my ways. And I'm like at now 40, I'm like, yes, I'm very set in my ways. I can't imagine 70. Like this idea of sharing space with someone. She's like, I don't want to hear someone breathe at night?
Can't relate to anything more.
Yeah, exactly. At least for me, I'm like, oh, I can see the future maybe, right?
Mhm.
And it's just interesting to think all the things that we consider and all the things that we de-emphasize as we age too?
Yeah. Well, and I think it was interesting the parent and child relationship in the sense of I think her kids didn't necessarily understand her desire to live alone either. They're kind of coming to it from a practical sense of like, you're gonna fall, something's gonna happen, you should go in this home. And I mean, part of it because they like didn't communicate very well with one another, but not understanding like this space and home that Sybil had made for herself and like the happiness that she had felt there. So yeah, it definitely made me ponder like, different relationships and the choices people make and just trying to like let's not be judgy about what people are doing with their lives.
Hmm. I liked that there was a big change in Sybil throughout the book. I shouldn't say throughout the book. Towards the end, there was like a big shift for her. And I appreciated that someone at that age can change, right? And I'm just thinking about all the complex parent-child relationships out there and how, as the child, maybe you do all this work around accepting your parent without them actually ever meeting you in that change, right? And so we get to kind of see her do that, which I was like, oh, yay. Like,
I thought you were going to
um,
say that that was like unrealistic because it
well,
doesn't happen.
it's both for me,
Yeah.
right? Like it feels unrealistic and also not. Like it felt hopeful
Hmm.
too.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's fiction we're reading at the end of the day. It's nice to have a little bit of, yeah, like
Exactly.
optimism.
Exactly. So, one cool part of this is that Sybil writes to people that she admires, and, she will write to an author after she finishes a book, which I thought was so fun. And, she writes to like Joan Didion and Ann Patchett. Who would you write to?
So I thought this was funny. I was talking to my team at work about this, and
Hmm.
one of the girls on my team, she's like, I do that all the time. I slide into like any book I've read, she like is right in the DMs telling the author why she loved it. And she's like, sometimes they come back, which I thought was really funny. I guess it's not quite a letter, but I was trying to think of who I would write to, and I realized that I have sort of done this as well. Like my two heroes in life are Nick Cave and Henry Rollins, which people have strong feelings about, so don't come at me. I just really like them for different reasons, which I think I would evolve it to maybe like include Patti Smith in that piece
Hmm.
as well. But one time I did email Henry Rollins about his radio show and he replied. So I was like, that counts already as one. And then the second is I would probably write to Nick Cave, but he already does this. He has this newsletter called The Red Hand Files, where he goes through people's letters and he literally replies. He picks and chooses the ones that he wants and he replies, and that's his newsletter, which is really super because sometimes he's, very, very funny and witty, and sometimes he's really vulnerable and talking about heavy subjects. And he's very publicly gone through a lot of grief. He's lost two of his children. So people ask very heavy questions of him that he answers with a lot of grace, which I always respect. I feel like I kind of get that in that I'm reading his letters to other people. And I guess, yeah, I don't know what I would say to. So Patti Smith is the last one that I have, who I guess I did meet in person and she signed a book. So does that count as well? So now it's a long-winded way of saying, like, I've already got everything I wanted.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting to think about the different points of contact there, right? Like
Hmm.
I too have sent a DM to someone if they did something that I liked or honored or whatever it was. And there's something, I don't know, I think about a DM and it felt silly to do that versus, I don't know, writing a letter. I don't know why that is. Maybe it's because what social media has become and you know that these people are getting flooded with tons of DMs or whatever it is. But yeah, I love the concept of reaching out, and good on you for making that contact.
Yeah, I don't know. You just become a fan and you get a little bit nerdy about it. But who would
Mhm.
you write to?
I know I was thinking about this and I thought about it in context of, I think, authors. I think Joan Didion would be a great one to contact. And then I also was thinking about, I last month read two Octavia E. Butler books, and I'm not like the biggest science fiction reader, but I was like, wow, like she really had this way of writing characters and predicting things. And so there's a part of me that would, want to know a little bit more about what's to come in this world, right? So that's kind of where I went with it in my mind. It was like, I would love to hear her thoughts on the future as well. But yeah, those are the two that I was thinking about.
Maybe I'm a little bit spoiled at work because we do get to talk to authors all the time. That we,
Yeah.
we were just having a big discussion because Patrick Radden Keefe is this author that I love, and I think he might be coming into my work for an interview. And we like there was a big. My friend and I were kind of like, can we come? Like, can we come and ask him questions? So yeah, maybe that's why it's harder for me because I'm spoiled and have this world a little bit more available than some.
hmm I mean, in full disclosure, I have sent a DM to Lady Gaga in the past.
What did
And
it
it
say?
and it went unanswered. Which is like, it was after she had a documentary come out like years ago. I think it was called like 5'2" or something. And I just really connected with it. And then I think I also learned that we shared the same birthday and the same year.
Oh
And so
yeah.
I was like, oh, wow, it's like feels cool to be connected with someone that's like basically your exact same age. And in the documentary, it really highlighted a lot of the chronic pain that she was living with. And I just appreciated her rawness, and I just thought it was so well done. And yeah, so I sent her a DM.
Gaga, there's still time to
I
get back
know.
to her.
I know. And we live close to each other.
What do you think she did for her 40th?
I don't know. I know I was thinking about that. I should have invited her to my ocean dip in the morning for a new decade.
I like that yours is your birthday twin is so high profile, and the person that I always consider who's close in age, I don't think it's quite the same exact day, is Lauren Conrad.
Oh my
So it's
gosh.
not, I think she's like June, but she's the same year as that we were born as well.
Oh
But
yeah.
that those are not the same category of person.
No, but I mean, we have that reunion coming up,
I know,
the
gotta
Laguna
watch
Beach
that.
reunion.
Yeah.
That's a fun group because they basically are our exact
I
ages,
know.
you
I think
know?
that's why I like those reality
Mhm.
shows so much. It was just like they were in high school and we were in extremely different lives, but like the problems are the same.
You mean Laguna Beach isn't really similar to Ireland?
No, it's really not got the same feel of small town North Cork. No, it does not.
I will say Laguna Beach is also not similar to Vacaville, California.
More similar though, I would imagine.
Yes, I would say so.
Fair.
We're giving Vacaville a lot of credit here.
That's where Papa Roach came from. Never forget.
I know. Don't worry. No one would ever let me forget
I
that.
was so excited when I think when you told me that. I was like, it's ingrained. It's never leaving my brain.
Yeah, it's always like Papa Roach, or there's a prison there, right?
Oh.
Anyways, coming back to this. So this novel, speaking of famous people, is being adapted into a big screen movie with Jane Fonda. What are your thoughts there?
I mean, love Jane Fonda. I think she would be terrific. I'm curious about the how it would capture the novel writing. Like how exciting is that as a viewer? Or like is it going to be like flashbacky? Like, yeah, I can't imagine how they will adapt it, but it'd be interesting to see. I think it's a really interesting story, and obviously she's a character that is complex and people are drawn to even if they don't like her. So I think Jane Fonda would be a good fit for that. What do you think?
I agree. I think Jane Fonda has this fierceness that relates well to Sybil. I think when I was listening to the book, I pictured her a little bit more like a Julie Andrews, but I think Jane Fonda's an excellent choice. Like I think, can embody these parts of Sybil, just given what I know about Jane Fonda, who I also love.
I know, but she's almost too perfect, though. I feel like you want like a regular person
Mm,
too. Not that
hmm
Frances McDormand is a regular person, but I think I kind of pictured something along that line just because I rewatched
hmm
Nomad not that long ago, and I'm like,
hmm
I think she really fits into that sort of role. Whereas Jane Fonda is such a star, but I guess it
Yeah.
depends on how the movie's made.
I also think I see Jane Fonda as a good fit because I think she can embody the privilege that
Mm.
Sybil had. Like she was a privileged woman, working as a law clerk. She was financially stable and wealthy and sort of could probably mix into the higher society. So I think that's why I was like, okay, I can see that. Whereas like Frances McDormand, yeah, I also love, but I see her more as of the earth, like I don't know, like I
More
don't
of a
know.
character actress or actor.
Yeah, yeah, but both would be excellent choices.
Mm. So, what do you think was your biggest takeaway from reading The Correspondent?
I think there was a lot of takeaways. It had one of my favorite quotes about grief that I had read in a long time. I wrote down here, and it's grief, the biggest grief in the world is like, what? What is it that happens to a person? I've always felt like it's a scream living inside me that's gotten a little bit softer over time, but it's never gone. And that was just such a hitter for me in terms of describing grief. I feel like this book touches on so many huge themes: grief, family trauma, correspondence, obviously. And I also really appreciated this idea that we can grow and change at any age. Like we were saying earlier, I think that's like a really beautiful takeaway to have, as well as just really inspiring me to be more open towards everyday encounters and figure out ways of staying in touch with people that feel more, I don't know, vulnerable and long format, although I do love my voice memos now. What about you?
Yeah, I guess the same. I don't know if I have anything else to add on to what you've just said. Like, yeah, I also really liked that quote about grief. And yeah, I guess maybe like a little bit of an encouragement to tackle some of the harder things sooner because although I don't think there's regret in this book or with Sybil at all, I think as a reader, I was kind of like, man, I wish she was like, had gone through some of this stuff. So there's longer in her life for these relationships. So that was the
Mm-hmm.
thing, especially with the complicated family stuff. It was kind of maybe a little bit of an encouragement of like, check in with your people and build those relationships up again because ultimately it's a book about, life being long, but also not very long. So yeah, I think that was a takeaway for me.
So, book number two that we have for this month is Alone by Daniel Schreiber. Tara, why did you choose this book?
I picked this book because of maybe just what we touched on. It's a book about people that are not people, about the author choosing to live alone and why people do that and being a bit more thoughtful with that choice. So when I was reading The Correspondent and trying to think about a book that would pair well with it, I read this book last year and I thought the themes were sort of similar in choosing something that this single lifestyle and decentralizing romantic relationships in a way that is maybe not the societal norm. And I really liked the writing of it. I listened to the audiobook this time ahead of the podcast as I had read the book last year and the audio was good, but I think that the writing is really something to be sat with and
Mm-hmm.
it resonated with me much more on the page. And yeah, I thought it would pair well in terms of themes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I read the book and I can agree that I felt like there were so many, as you can see, it's very marked up. I appreciated the way he framed things and yeah, it's a little bit of a book that you can sit with and it's not very long, so
No.
you can take your time with it. For listeners that don't know of this book, can you just give a brief overview?
Sure. It's actually a translation as well, which I find interesting. It was first written
Hmm.
in the author's native German. And I found this book through another writer that I like, Octavia Bright. She had a memoir that came out a year or so, actually maybe a few years ago, but I reread it again last year as well, This Ragged Grace. And I love her writing. It's very literary and sort of like poetic and just, yeah, the writing is really beautiful. And I actually took a course of hers last year, and she had a stack of like other memoirs that she recommended, and this was one of them. And so I picked it up and just really, really liked it. So I haven't read anything else by Daniel Schreiber, but I enjoy this book. It's a warning off the top. I forgot how COVID heavy this book is. Like he's very much writing about a time of isolation during lockdown, so that can be a little bit off-putting to folks that maybe don't want to delve back into that time of the world. But it's essentially about the writer's life as he's. I mean, Sybil describes herself as being in the winter of her life, and I feel Daniel is probably entering his autumn or fall, like if we were to use those metaphors, as other people are settling down and having families and buying houses and choosing that. He's still choosing to live alone, but really focusing on the friendships that he has, his relationship to the outdoors and nature. And he's sort of trying to discover what he loves about being alone, also what's challenging, and kind of just he does it also through other people's writing, which I thought was another theme that
Hmm.
matched with this book with the other one. They're both great admirers of the writing that they like and speak a lot to that piece. So yeah, I just thought it was a good pairing. I hope you thought so too.
Definitely. And I agree and appreciate the way you're framing him being in the autumn stage of his life because I I think we are a little bit in that stage right
Yeah.
now and it's been interesting to see how long or how short that stage is for our peers or for ourselves. And, I think he does a really good job kind of capturing the back and forth of moving towards connection and understanding the idea of being alone and how much he wants to lean into his friendships and then you have the COVID lockdown happen and yeah, so it's just it you get to see him navigate like how do I want to move into this stage and you notice the grief of the other friendships moving on and I just thought his words really spoke to me and how he captured just like I don't know what the word is, like the uncertainty of this stage. Yeah, I really appreciated it and not really knowing what it was about going in and then thinking about how this paired with the correspondent. I was like, there's some really interesting themes here. And I agree with the seasonality of both books too.
hmm it didn't help us trying to find a more optimistic and easy read though. And I was I was thinking to myself, I was like, poor Amanda.
Mm,
Like you said, it's not a very long book, but it's very
hmm.
thoughtfully written. I find myself taking my time with his words and them sort of staying with me. I have a lot of underlined passages.
Well, and I think I didn't feel sad for the when I was reading this. It was more of it brought up existential thoughts. And I think that feels like a big difference between the two books is this existential questioning versus where I see the correspondent being maybe the idea of being alone. And then you're seeing all the circumstances that kind of like led to that, where although, of course, there are circumstances that are leading Daniel to choosing this, like you see him kind of pondering different ways of stepping into the next stage and this idea of being alone versus romantic relationships versus holding up friendships.
Hmm
There's a quote here. When you live alone, it is friendships that often form the center of your life. The relationships that I have with many of my friends have lasted longer than my longest romantic relationships. These friendships are the source of my greatest conflicts as well as my greatest joy. What did you think about his writing on friendship?
I was, that's like I could have written that thing,
Yeah.
feeling the same way. I like that the comparison of, my greatest conflicts as well as my greatest joys. And yeah, when you live alone, that is, you're really emphasizing the time that you're spending with your friends and, your chosen family, especially as Daniel is a queer writer. So I think he touches on that a little bit about like chosen family. I think we touched on this when we talked about Anna Goldfarb's book around
Mhm.
how complicated friendships can be because we don't often have those tough conversations. So I think that seeing it as, the source of greatest conflicts, but also greatest joy is apparent in that because we put a lot of emphasis on it, but we don't necessarily talk too much about our friendship or the role that our friends have with one another. And it can be, yeah, like joyous, but also confusing.
So in the book, the author, he brings in this idea of these popular television shows that highlight and portray groups of friends, like Friends, Seinfeld, How I Met Your Mother, as relatable and also aspirational, and how a lot of times these friendship groups are sort of the preparation for marriage, and then everyone gets married and then the show's over, right? It's like the next stage. And I feel like it's a commentary on society emphasizing the importance of friendships as transitions before marriage. Like, what are your thoughts on this?
I didn't necessarily think about that. Like, I mean, Friends that I've watched to death, and I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. It does end with everyone pairing off, and I wasn't too sh I was like thinking that maybe that's just because it's ending with the happily ever after. But why is the happily ever after them pairing off forever? I think that's what he's getting at. So
Hmm.
I think it is interesting that that's the sort of goal or portrayal of like friendship groups. And also it's always the same core. Like there might be partners that come in, but there's always the main cast, right? Unless somebody's been recast for whatever reason. So I think that's kind of unrealistic as well, that it's kind of like Sex in the City, right? You're never having those four friends that are your girlfriends forever. Like that's gonna ebb and flow.
Yeah, I think these shows kind of stop prematurely on the lifespan of friendships because, and it's television, right? So it's like probably impossible to actually show the years of distance, and then the kids are grown and then you come back to each other or you don't, right? Like I think it gives us like this aspirational snapshot that doesn't really feel that realistic in so many ways, and also plants this idea that we have to have these friend groups when many of us don't have that type of friend group, especially as we get older, or your friends move away and you're constantly forming like new connections. And but I think having watched these shows, it kind of created this expectation of that being a part of the autumn of my life. And while, I think technology and quick correspondence can create those groups and have connection to that, in a very real way, I find the friend group thing to be a little bit of a fallacy. Like I don't really know that many of us get that. And I think I kind of had a little expectation of that in some ways, whether that was my own thoughts about it or I was being influenced by what I was consuming as like a young person.
Well, I was
Yeah.
thinking about, we were comparing our ages to both Lauren Conrad and Lady Gaga. But if you think about the show Girls, right? That came out when
Hmm.
we were kind of the same age as
Yes.
Lena
Yes.
Dunham et al. And
Yeah.
Broad City as well, sort of like similar. But
Yeah.
these are all like youthful shows because that's what television wants is like the youthful
Hmm.
show, right? So
Hmm.
maybe there isn't a show that is realistic about the autumn of one's life because it's challenging and
Hmm.
people are making fewer poor decisions, hopefully. But
Hmm. Yeah, it's a little
yeah,
more boring.
exactly. Yeah, they're not getting that that's not getting greenlit.
Like, like I went to bed at 9 p.m. Like, it's like it's not fun. It's not like the sexy thing that we want to see. I actually lived in New York when Girls was released. So, and it's fun because I actually did a rewatch of that show last year. And it was just
How does it
real.
hold up?
I think it was really, I mean, I know Lena Dunham, there's a lot of polarizing views on Lena Dunham,
Yeah,
but like,
she has a second memoir coming out.
I know. But I thought that show was so genius. And
Mhm.
I know that it lacked for diversity and I know that there's all these other problematic things, but I also feel like it was so well written and it was a really fun rewatch because I'm outside of that 20s stage living in New York trying to figure it out and it was like it made me laugh so hard because I'm like some of these things feel really true to like what that stage was, like who you date, the decisions you make, what happens with friendships. Like it felt, not completely realistic because I didn't have a lifestyle that was being funded by my parents in my 20s, but like there were parts of it that felt very true.
Yeah, she definitely captures that time period well. I remember when I visited New York one time, I actually saw them filming Broad City, but didn't
Oh,
know what it was at
wow.
the time. But I remember getting so excited to see them filming something and wrote it down. And
Hmm.
then, like, I
Hmm.
guess like a year later watching the show, being like, that was it. That was the scene. It was
Wow.
fun. To get back to the book here, Alone, Schreiber writes about feeling empowered by living alone, but also grappling with that need for connection, which we've talked a little bit about as something that Sybil still struggles with. And there was a quote that I really liked that says, loneliness means something different to each and every one of us. Some people are rarely haunted by it, others often are. What did you think about that?
That quote is really interesting because, just like any experience, we're all going to relate to it in different ways. And I think Daniel in the book is in this stage where he is examining aloneness and then is also kind of forced to live it, not by choice, right? So I think he's already in this existential exploration. And then he's in a situation that was out of all of our control, which was, having to be sheltered in place and being alone in this way. And so I don't know. I think it really just depends on the person, right? And their connection to their understanding of being alone, how it's framed for them, because there's such a big difference between being alone versus feeling lonely, right? Which we see in both of these books, right? Like Sybil is alone by choice and circumstance, but also is really reaching out for these connections. And Daniel is alone by circumstance as well, but is already sort of in this process of trying to decide if this is what he's actively choosing. Right. So I just think it's like it really depends on the person. And I would say like life circumstance, season, all of that. And I think that's what's so interesting about this idea of being alone and loneliness because it's something that everyone can relate to. And I think some people are maybe a little bit more built for solitude or actively choose that, either that by circumstance or personality or whatever. And then there's other people that really feel as it though it's happening to them, right? And yeah, I wonder if there's room for an exploration of how to feel more empowered in this idea of being alone while also holding that we are all really wired for connection. So there's always going to be that drive, I think, to connect. And that's just inherent in all of us.
Yeah, I liked that both books didn't have, alone equals loneliness because that's what
Hmm.
it could be on the surface to seem about. They both challenge that there can be, I think Daniel writes about this, you can be in relationships and feel lonely. It's more about the core of knowing who you are and what you want in
Hmm.
terms of connection. So I liked that it was just living alone doesn't equal a lonely life. Like your life
Hmm.
can be fulfilled. It's just all about the choices that you're making.
Hmm. Yeah.
And both books touch on getting older, with Sybil kind of being an older protagonist, and Daniel writes a lot about aging. He wrote about getting wrinkles, which I loved the way that he wrote this was they suited my face. I found them
Hmm.
beautiful. Do you find it challenging to read about people getting older just as we are getting older ourselves?
Yes and no. I think I have had this expectation about aging and aging gracefully. And it's been interesting to observe my own aging and my relationship to my body changing and my wrinkles and things like that. I do find it inspiring and I also find it relatable in some ways to be like, okay, how do I accept this new change? How do I see what's happening and recognize that this is part of my aging process and not fixate on it a little too much? And I think it's fun to just have things written out that are normalizing getting wrinkles and accepting that it's part of your ever-changing personhood, because I think we're so inundated with this idea of anti-aging. And I know personally I've succumbed to some of those narratives because it's kind of everywhere. But I think having this sort of like representation of acceptance is so important to read. And I love that line too. I'm glad you wrote that one out because I was like, oh yes, like this just feels really refreshing to see.
Yeah, it is refreshing, and I left feeling inspired by it because I do sometimes find myself it's a challenge. Like I think we've talked about this before that aging is
Hmm.
like a little bit harder than I thought it would be,
Yeah.
especially where everyone that we see online is aiming to look as young as possible. So
Hmm.
sometimes I'll catch a picture of myself and man, I look old now. But then
Hmm.
it's balanced with like I also really appreciate that it's a gift to get to age and to be able to do this. And the older I get, the more I actually start looking like my mom or my grandmother and like that. I didn't when I was younger, so it's kind of interesting as well to see that, you're becoming this other person and we can't really hold on to the nostalgia of youth because it's not realistic, but it is I it's hard because we're inundated with like we actually shouldn't get to age gracefully. Like that's not what society wants of us. Society wants us to aim to be younger. But I think yeah, growing old is a privilege that yeah, I have to reading books like this reminds me that I need to rewire to find it inspiring and not get stuck on like an algorithm loop of faces that aren't actually real.
Yeah, I mean, I find it interesting too. I mean, I this is the year we both turned 40. I just
Hmm.
turned 40 and I think the way different people have related to that news has been really interesting. Like I've been getting a lot of maybe younger people colleagues or acquaintances being like, "You look great for 40." And
You're
then
like,
like
thanks.
there's like a part of me that's like, yeah. And then there's like another part of me that's like, wait, what? Like,
Like, what does that
like,
mean?
yeah. So it's like I feel the internal conflict there of like, this is a compliment, I guess, because that is what we are striving for. At least that's the way it seems. And then I get the older folks in my life like, oh, you're just a baby. And so it's just like it's such an interesting thing to be 40 is substantial. Do I think I'm an elder? No. But I'm not a teenager.
No, we're
And
middle-aged. We can call
yeah.
ourselves middle-aged. Yeah.
Okay, I don't think 40 is middle age. Do you think 40
I
is middle age?
100%.
Oh, okay. I would say 45 is my middle age. What do you think, listeners? What is middle aged?
I I think it's okay for us to be middle-aged.
No, I'm not saying
Yeah.
there's anything wrong with being
Yeah.
middle aged, but in my mind, I'm like we're living so much longer if we're lucky. And yeah, I don't know. In my mind, the marker is 45, but who knows? But yeah, I just think it's been really interesting to have people react to me being like, oh, I just turned 40. And I actually feel very excited about 40s. And at the same time, holding all these complicated feelings about aging and getting older and noticing the changes and noticing the expectation I have on myself to age gracefully. Like, oh,
Yeah.
I didn't realize I was holding all these, but it definitely comes out. And I think it's okay. It feels complex.
And that's why I liked both of these books together, and especially like for you and I to chat about it, because I think we both are quite individual and haven't lived our life striving for those very standard, boxes that you tick of by 25, you're married, you own a house by X, or, which are like more traditional and nothing to
Hmm.
anyone who has those goals either. They're just like it's not what you and I sort of have moved
Hmm.
toward. It makes it sound like we're a couple, but just like we just share that similarity of,
Yeah.
I guess, focusing more on ourselves and what we're looking for, not necessarily what the world tells us we should be striving toward.
Yeah, exactly. What did you take away from this book?
I think maybe that piece to
Hmm.
keeping more in mind what like I personally find that makes me happy. Like I live alone. I love living alone. I love my little space.
Hmm.
And yeah, and to just really spend time on the things that make you happy and with the people that make you happy. I think that was kind of what I found inspiring by it. And I'm sure I'll revisit it again because it's something that it's a book that you could definitely pick up in different life stages too and take something from.
Hmm.
What did you take away from it?
I think I took away a lot of gratitude for the way that he wrote this, let's call it the autumn stage of life. And to your point, he put things into words that I've felt in the past. It didn't feel like there were answers or
Mhm.
like, like I would be really curious to see if he were to write a book like this in 20 years for himself, like what's changed. Like it didn't feel like this is a choice that he's now sticking in forever. It to me, it added, some layers and flexibility to a different way of living. And it made me feel really grateful for the choices that I've made. To your point, maybe the choices that I made in my 20s that felt random, I'm like, oh, thank God I did all those things. And yeah, it made me feel a lot of gratitude for the way that my life has unfolded and the choices I've made and for this stage of the in-betweens. Yeah, I think gratitude is what I really got from this book. And it's definitely one I'll revisit. Thanks for listening to Books from Your Therapist. If you're interested in the books we talked about, we'll include links in our show notes. If you'd like to reach out to us with your own recommendations or are a mental health practitioner or an author interested in coming on to share, you can email us at booksfromyourtherapist@gmail.com.
If you're in California and interested in working with Amanda, you can find her at amandathrockmorton.com and follow us on socials. We are at Books From Your Therapist on Instagram, Threads, TikTok, and Substack.
Happy writing letters to your friends, family, and people you admire.
Happy reading all the letters that you're going to get and just taking the time to develop those friendships. Yeah, happy letter writing. I can't top that.